Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome staff, people in the gallery, council. I'd like to open this Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of Tuesday, May 21st. We have 3 agenda items that we're dealing with this morning. Just ask staff if there's any other items they have besides the ones on the agenda now.
No changes from staff, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Council, do you have any additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Any disclosure of interest, councillors? I'm pleased to see that because we have quorum. So everyone will be present for all of the reports this morning. We'll start with 5.1, Cannabis Restore Application number CRS-9. There's a proposed motion, staff recommendation on the screen. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Thank you, Councillor Lavery. I'll ask the CEO to read the motion, please.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that Council approve application CRS-9 and that Council consider its resolution with respect to the following: Provincial Cannabis Retail Store License Referral number 1876, Zoning Bylaw 2303 and City Policy 3.20. Public notification followed by the holding of a hearing on May 27th and the impact of the application on the community.
Okay, thank you. I believe, CEO, the resolution is to deny the application. I wasn't sure if that's what you said.
The resolution that I've read is to approve it. The staff recommendation is to deny it.
Okay, so if staff were to want to follow the staff recommendation, they would have to amend the motion.
They would
or defeat
vote against
the motion.
it. Yeah.
Understand. Okay, Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This is a cannabis retail store application number 9. It's the 9th application of such filed to the city since last year. And the applicant is Quantum One Cannabis Corporation, represented by Quan Lee. And I believe Mr. Lee is here. He
Thank you.
Came up from Vancouver, if I'm correct. And he has applied to use the old Windmill Meats building at 470 Lakeshore Drive. He's applied to turn that into a cannabis retail store. And this is, as I mentioned, this is the 9th application the city has reviewed. This property is located in the commercial core area of the city. And in relation to our policy, our new cannabis retail store policy, our policy only supports 4 stores. Council has approved 4 stores already in the core, and those approvals were made known to Mr. Lee. Nevertheless, he applied with the city. He spent the $1,000 application fee, and he wanted to proceed with the application.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Lee, would you like to come forward and talk to us about your application?
Sure.
Thank you for coming to seminar.
No problem. So when we actually applied at that location, we didn't know how many applications were in the commercial core area. And when the province finally sent our referral to that area is when we learned there were already 4 applications that were approved. But the reason why we decided to go forward is because so far the province has actually approved only 2 there. And we thought maybe there would be a chance that one of those applications, I believe there's 2 pending approval from the province now, would not be able to pass their security screening or financial integrity screening from the province. Because if you do have, if you applied under a company that made profits selling cannabis illegally in the past, they might be denied the financial integrity screening or a security screening because they might have been doing business in Salmon in the past without a license. We don't exactly know what their policy is going to be, but because we spent so much time and efforts putting in our applications up until that point, we thought it might actually be worth it just to see what would happen to those applications and see if we can't get the 4th position if one of those applications that are pending approval from the province gets denied. So I actually do have a question on, well, I mean, if those two other applications are approved by the province and there are 4 cannabis store approvals in the commercial core area, then that's fair enough. But what would happen if one of those applications do get denied and there ends up only 3 approved or just 2 approved in the commercial core area?
I appreciate your question, and we will answer that. Not right this second, but we will during our discussion for sure.
Great, that's all I wanted to bring up today.
Okay, thank you. I'll just see if councillors have any questions for you. Council, do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay. My only question is, I just want to make sure I understand. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Cannon, you have a question. You go ahead.
So my question is, have you got the approvals in place?
Approvals from, well, actually, we don't have any approvals yet.
Okay.
Not in Salmon.
So do you have other stores that you've done, or?
We have, actually, we submitted 5 applications so far in a few different towns in BC, and they're all at the same step. So we got our referrals from BC, but the security screening and the financial integrity is still pending from the province. It seems there's a bit of a lineup, and it's taking a little while because our company, it's been doing business in the media sector before. So they have to go through all of the books instead of just seeing a completely new company with no financial records before, which would have taken much less time. But yes, we're still waiting. But we're very hopeful that we'll actually pass that step.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? So, Mr. Lee, my question is, I just want to make sure I understand. So you applied to the province and put in your $7,500 without knowing that there were already 4 applications that have been accepted by the city in the downtown core?
Yes, that's correct. That was back in the end of November last year. And at that time, we didn't have that data.
Okay, and then once you'd done that, you found out we had 4 and you thought, well, we might as well go for the $1,000 city application and see what happens.
Yes, because that happened in February, I believe, 4 months after we submitted our original application.
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. You can have a seat. We'll see if there's any questions for you later. Council, do you have any questions for staff? Councillor Lindgren.
Thanks. So I'm actually curious about the same thing as Mr. Kwan about, do we create a lineup if any of the previous applications are turned down? Do we create a lineup, and would the person who applied and was denied prior to Mr. Kwan be in that lineup, or have they moved on?
It's a good question. Let's ask staff for their thoughts on that question.
Your Worship, we don't formally create a lineup. Basically, when the policy was adopted late last year, the first application that came in was for the greenery just over there. And that was like 3 weeks after the federal legislation was passed. It went to council quite quickly. It was approved by council November 13th and approved by the province this month. So quite a time lag between city council approval and provincial approval. Our policy states that if council has approved 4 stores, then that is a maximum number. And I've tried to contact the province to find out where they are at with applications, and they've given us some vague answers on those. And sometimes we do receive notification when there's an approval in principle, but that doesn't mean final approval. So as you can see on page 2 of the agenda, the chart there shows the status of all the applications that City Council has approved and where they are at in the provincial queue. So no, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up with
Yes,
that?
please do, Councillor Lindgren.
So just curious, what happens now if we were to deny this application? Would that end the process, and would Mr. Kwan have to reapply? Or would it be better, or I don't even know if there's a process, but for us to defer this decision until after we hear what the status of the other 2 applicants is?
Good question. Director of Development Services.
Councillor Lindgren's question was something I was thinking about myself. It's a good one. Because the decision today is not technically a formal decision, council has to make the decision, right? So, for example, you could basically defer the council decision to wait until the province makes its decision on the other 3 core applications. That's a possibility. The other option is to deny it.
Thank you.
Or approve it.
Councillor Lindgren, do you have any follow-up to that?
I think I would like to defer this application until we have further information on the pending applicants.
Okay. We have a couple other speakers, Councillor Lindgren. So if you move to defer, that means the discussion ends now, assuming the deferral motion passes.
I'm happy to delay my deferral until we hear the rest of the speakers.
Okay, I didn't think I heard a formal motion there. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Thanks for the presentation and thanks to staff. So my questions are very similar to Councillor Lindgren's. I mean, we started off by saying this whole process is a learning journey. We're going to learn as we go here. And I think this issue of wait lists, much like French immersion or other things, I fully agree. I think with the staff suggestion is that we're not going to curate a wait list in this process. And I concur with that. I also would tend to the idea of deferring this. Your Worship, I'm wondering, is it possible to ask the applicant through you, Your Worship, because there's a $1,000 application fee here, and what the applicant's preference would be about approval. I know approval and defeat, but how they felt about deferring.
Mr. Lee, would you like to come forward to the microphone? I'll get you to speak into that microphone. So Councillor Lavery's question is, how would you feel if the Planning Committee recommended to Council to defer your application until the status of the other 2 applications was determined?
We'd be very much in favor of that. We would love to wait until to see what the wait is, because if we were denied now, you'd have to send a negative recommendation to the province. Our application will go to the very back of the line. We will probably try to send in an application again, but at that time the order will probably be all scrambled. So a deferral sounds good.
Councillor Lavery, do you want to follow that question?
No, thank you. That's what I need. Thank you.
Thank you. You can have a seat. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. My questions were answered, but I would support.
Sorry.
My questions were answered, and I think I would support a deferral if someone wants to make that motion.
Okay. Councillor Lindgren.
I move that we defer a decision on this particular application until after we know the status of the existing applications in the downtown core.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Cannon. There's no discussion on a deferral motion, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. So, Mr. Lee, you can check in with staff following this meeting and they'll explain further to you if you wish. Okay, we'll move on to second item, Agricultural Land Commission application number 380, Smith, 1281 70th Avenue Northeast. We have a proposed motion. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Cannon move. Councillor Lavery second. We'll have the CAO read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Lavery, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that application ALC 380 be authorized for submission to the Agricultural Land Commission.
Thank you. And is Mr. Smith, yes, Mr. Smith here, do you wish to come forward and speak to us a little bit more about your application?
Morning, Council. We've had this property here. We bought it in 1993. I built the building in 1998, and at that time did ask the city if I needed a building permit for building the building. They at that time told me no because I was over 10 acres. So we built it, and and had an office on one end until 2007 for a home business, and a suite on the other. The land in the green on the top side of that property is not ALR land. The green line there defines where it is. That's the only flat land on our property. It has been cleared. It used to be an orchard, a cherry orchard, and we cleared it, and it's been fenced, held sheep last year, and it has 300 haskap berries planted in there, and it has about half a dozen cherry trees still from the original orchard. So the land we're asking to be exempted is 1,200 square feet, and we've included 2.5 acres of ALR land, or non-ALR land that's being used for farmland. Didn't have a problem with the ALC. I did have a complaint from our neighbor in 2016, and at that time the city and I started dealing with it, and we went to the ALC, and they said we don't see it as an issue at that time. So the city at that time also didn't, if it was an ALR land, it would be an approved suite, detached suite on a secondary suite, and that's allowed in the zoning. So the ALC is the application that we have to pass, and we need your recommendation to do it.
Great, thank you.
It's been there for, I've had several mayors and councillors in that building in the last 20 years, and we've never had a complaint until our current neighbor moved in.
Great, thank you very much. And we'll just have you have a seat first, and then because I skipped the Director of Development Services explanation, did you want to speak further to this before we open up questions to Mr. Smith?
Your Worship, I can answer questions, but the report explains my perspective of it.
Okay, great. Mr. Smith, I think we might have a question for you. Councillor Lindgren, do you have a question for the applicant?
Thanks. I'm just wondering what the complaint from the neighbor was.
It would take about an hour and a half to give them all.
Okay, could you give me a general idea? Is this a noise
with-
complaint or a land use complaint, or I just don't?
He's complained about us having a shop on the property. Our kids are grown up now, but while they were younger, they did have some friends over in that shop, mostly inside. He complained about that. He built gates, roads, fences, cattle guards, all blocking the easement and the city's right-of-way, which I had to take him to court to, and I've cleared the city's right-of-way and ours through a Supreme Court ruling. We got the feeling that he's bought all the land around us, and we got the feeling he wanted ours too, so he'd make our life miserable. And he blocked with fences and gates right in front of our shop and office, which the easement said no. So whatever complaint he can figure out, he uses against us. The city, finally, we had a letter from Kevin saying that he wasn't going to take any more complaints from myself about him. We did complain back at things. He's got a very large building there without a building permit. 10,000 square feet and then a roof on top. But I did, anyway, Kevin finally wrote a letter saying he's had enough, and the staff didn't have time to respond to the complaints, which was music to my ears. And it wasn't just mine, it was Mr. Wiseman's here too. And so it's a boring, long story. You guys don't want to waste your time with any more.
Thank you. And for council's information, as the report states, that there is written correspondence on file upstairs. And regardless of council's recommendation here, if we recommend it move forward to the LC, that documentation, of course, would be forwarded with this information. Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
One other point, we do rent that suite for substantially lower than it's worth. We rent it for $750 a month. That person does help with keeping the yard up around there, feeds our chickens when we're gone. Sometimes we have somebody else, but quite often them, and does plan on helping us harvest our haskap crop too. And you are allowed on an agriculture piece of property to have a secondary residence. There's no definition in the LR of what a farm helper is, but it's gray zone.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Council, do you have any questions for staff or comments? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Harrison. Just a clarification on the process, mainly for the gallery. After we vote on this at planning today, it moves forward likely to the next session of council for ratification from full council. Is that correct?
Through you, your worship, what the planning committee decides today, it will still go to council, no matter what, next council meeting.
Thank you for that. And I just, as a sidebar here, it was interesting, both Councillor Cannon and I were at the CSRD last week, and there was all applications are different, but it was an ALC application where the rules of the local government have changed over time, A, and B, the rules of the ALC have changed over time and seem to be still changing as well. And so there's a lot of gray zone here. Your worship, I'd note that the report from staff really does summarize the key issues, as you alluded to. It refers to the delays involved, and I just want to say that that's been mainly due to a lack of quorum for us at the AAC, both in the March and the May meetings, and the applicant was unable to make an April meeting. So this has gone on a long period of time, and to my thinking, there really is a procedural fairness here right now. I think we do need to process this application in a timely manner, again, as staff has suggested. And there are still opportunities for input to council, and there are certainly opportunities as this gets forwarded, if it's successful, to the ALC for input down the line. So I'm fully confident that council will be able to make an informed and reasonable decision based on what's in front of us about the range of possible outcomes, and from staff that will be at the next council meeting, which will be next week.
Great, thank you. Do other councillors wish to comment on this application? Councillor Lindgren?
Is it possible for me to make a statement on this?
No, this is not a hearing this morning. Go ahead, Councillor Lindgren.
So I'm comfortable moving this forward to council. The building's already there. The impact on the land has happened 20 years ago. I think it's reasonable to put this forward to the next council meeting and to have a fulsome discussion with a full table there.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Worship, for a second time. And I just want to point out here that I think staff have done a good job at highlighting the core issues involved with the application. There is a lot of sidebar stuff going on with this, and I, for one, will focus on the merits of the core issues as presented by city staff, and that'll be my considerations in the next session.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to make comment. First of all, appreciate the staff report. I think that the few key pieces in the staff report that I'd like to share on the bottom of page 2, and I think Mr. Smith referred to this, which was an email from the ALC's Compliance and Enforcement Officer on November the 1st, 2017. What he said at that time was, "Thank you for providing a history of the property. After review, I confirm there is a single residential building and accommodation in the garage, which is described to be used as an agricultural building. I spoke briefly with Richard Smith. He says the accommodation is about 800 square feet. Therefore, I find the property is compliant with the ALC policy, which interprets residential uses in Zone 1, unless other information is proving otherwise. I'll be closing the file at my end." Of course, then as we know, the rules in the ALC changed, and after a complaint, the ALC contacted Mr. Smith and recommended that he do one of two things. Either cease residential use or attempt to seek ALC approval via this non-farm use application, which is what is before us right now. So I agree with Councillor Lavery, given the circumstances and the timing. I think it is the ALC who needs to make the decision on this building. They have all of the background. And I as well will be only focusing on the information that is in this report when it goes to council on the 27th. Is there any other comments before I call the question? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. We'll move on to item 3. Zoning amendment application number 1148, Massier, 1631 10th Street Southeast, A2 to R8. We have a motion on the screen. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Cannon, Councillor Lindgren, thank you. I'll read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Lindgren, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that a bylaw be prepared, adoption of which would amend zoning bylaw 2303 by rezoning Lot 2, Plan 1915 from A2 Rural Holding to R8 Residential Suite Zone.
Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, the property under application is located at 1631 10th Street Southeast. On the Appendix 1 map aerial photo, you can see it is on the west side of 10th Street Southeast. As you go up the hill, it's on your right hand side. It's a large property, 10 acres in size, approximately 200 meters by 200 meters. And just up the hill from that is the Byers View subdivision, which is building out. Right now, these properties are considered in Area B, and they're designated urban for urban residential development. The property has a long historic zone of A2, Rural Holding Zone, and the proposal is to rezone the property to R8, Residential Suite Zone. There's also an application in to subdivide the property into approximately 42 lots. And there's a conceptual layout here. What this layout doesn't show is we have an advanced street plan that was done recently by a land surveyor, and the city partnered with that. We're paying 50% of the cost of that advanced street plan because it benefits the planning department and the city as well. So we know where the future roads will go around this property if this were to be subdivided. And originally the application came in with a R1 proposal, and I encouraged Mr. Massier to apply to R8, similar to the reasons that the subdivisions around Hillcrest School went to a block R8 rezoning to avoid piecemeal applications and to reduce our load of R8 applications. So that's one benefit of it. The R8 zone is supported in this area. It's designated low density. And as far as zoning goes, there's absolutely no issue from staff on this proposal.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Massier, please come forward. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Would you like to share some further with us?
I've never been at one of these meetings before, so I'm not sure what to say. I really was following staff's recommendations for the R8 zoning. We've never did that in any of our other developments, but then there was, like you said, piecemeal ones where there was just one here and one there, and it only makes sense. With prices of construction and land going up, it only makes sense for families and affordable housing that you do this. So they have the ability to maybe to afford a dwelling with a suite, and it's kind of beneficial for our younger ones in the community, which we really like it when they stay here.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is there any questions for Mr. Massier? Seeing none, thank you very much. We may ask you back in a minute. Councillor Cannon, you have a question for staff?
Looking at page 36 there, the appendix 6, in the far corner, is that park, like allowance for park there in that development? Does it?
Your Worship, I'll try and get a better image of this for the council meeting, but yes, There is proposed park dedication in the northwest corner of the lot, which represents approximately 2% of the gross land area. And the idea is when the property to the north is subdivided, and we don't know when that will be, but when it is, then we would ask for another 2% of parkland from that property. And Scott, our senior planner, myself, and Mr. Massier walked this property just last week, and we walked down to this corner of the property, and it looks suitable to us for a future park. There is quite a substantial drop-off and gully here, which is right beside 7th Street Southeast. And you wouldn't know that 7th Street is a street. It's mostly covered in trees. It's a very old, dedicated road. I think it's over 50 years old. But there's future plans for a pedestrian corridor down 7th Street as well in our greenway strategy.
Okay, that's what I was kind of wondering.
And a utility corridor as well, because servicing this property will require extending services to the north down 7th Street to connect up with the future auto road alignment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Other comments? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just going back to the introductory page, there's 2 comments. So this property is 3.96 hectares, and at the bottom of page 27, it says A2 zone minimum parcel size for subdivision is 4 hectares. So is there a variance required here, or am I missing something? Or are these 2 separate pieces of information through you, Your Worship?
Director of Development Services?
Your Worship, it cannot be subdivided under the A2 zone because it's at the minimum parcel size. So that's the reason for going for a residential zone.
Which can then be, if I could follow, which can then be subdivided?
Exactly. So rezoning is a significant requirement of the subdivision application.
Okay, thank you. And so if we go to page 32 of our documents, and again, so I just want to thank you that, so it eliminates my last question about rezoning, because I was just noticing as we go north, there's a smaller portion on A2 there. So that would again be, if that was hypothetically being used for any sort of housing, it would go to residential R1 or R8 prior to subdivision. Thank you very much, Your Worship. I've learned something here today. Councillor Cannon asked the questions, but certainly the availability of not only a dedicated park space, but a pedestrian corridor and social trail through there is important, and we've got that built in, I'm sure, from long-term planning 50 years ago, so that is all good. So I will certainly vote to move this forward to Council.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Lindgren?
Thanks. So I haven't been sitting at this table very long, and but I know that we've approved a number of sort of similar applications. However, I've been exploring the idea of council or the city eventually developing some kind of policy on clear cutting or trying to save trees or trying to have less impact as we develop. And I'm cautious with this one. I'm happy to move it forward one step where we can look at it a little more closely, but I am currently uncomfortable with us taking another 10 acres and clear cutting it. I'm happy to see that there would be some green space, but 2% just doesn't seem like enough in a time when we need to be keeping trees and keeping shade and reducing our impact on the planet. So just things that I'll be keeping in the back of my mind as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, my comment is, first of all, I'm really pleased to see you coming forward with R8. Because of course that gives the option, people don't have to have a suite there, but they could have. And our experience at this table is when purchasers purchase in a subdivision where they know R8s are, It doesn't affect people purchasing, but at least they know up front. And that eliminates the need for them to come and spot zone it later. So I like the plan. I think the location is perfect. It's close to our infrastructure. We know that we're going to be putting through the auto road connector at some time, so the traffic flow will be good. So I will certainly vote in favor of moving this forward. I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. It passes unanimously. We have a motion for adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Lindgren, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of May 21st, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you, Council. Appreciate it. Thank you, staff, and thank you, folks who came to listen.